We're officially past Thanksgiving, so who's ready to make Christmas cards? Me, I'm ready! Yes! This girl's excited! Today is the first in a series of 4 different Christmas cards I'm going to be showing you how to paint. Here is what we're going to be making. Check these out. Aren't they adorable? So I designed these last week. I was playing around with different designs and I came up with tabby cats and little dogs wearing Santa hats because adorable. So all you need for this project are 6 paint colors. You'll need your paper towel, a watercolor brush, and some Christmas cards. And I was so excited to see that Arteza actually makes 100% cotton watercolor paper Christmas cards. It's kind of hard to find 100% cotton cards. And of course, because they're 100% cotton, they're going to cost a little bit more than your typical watercolor paper. So if that's not for you and you're having a hard time finding those, another great option is the Strathmore watercolor cards. These are both about 5 by 7 inches, which I think is the perfect size for doing a painting. So we're going to try these today. I am super excited. So what I did was I designed these by drawing them on just cheap printer paper first, and then I transferred them to my computer and turned them into traceable line drawings. Let me show you. So they're super easy to trace onto your watercolor paper. And if you're planning on painting along with me, the traceable line drawings of all 4 of my dogs and cats wearing Santa hats are available to you all for free. There's a link in the description for you to download the PDF bundle. So be sure to grab those, download them, and print them so you can join me and we can paint the cutest Christmas cards together. The design I'm going to be doing today is this little Dachshund puppy wearing the skinny little Santa hat, and I actually have a perfect reference photo from this. Thank you to all you photographers who upload your images of cats and dogs in clothing and allow us artists to use them for free. Thank you. The colors you're going to need for this project are these 6 colors. I have Holbein Yellow Ochre, Daniel Smith Burnt Sienna, Daniel Smith Ultramarine, Daniel Smith Indigo, Holbein Turquoise Blue, and this is an Engram Cadmium Red Light, but you could use any bright Christmas red that you have. These 5 colors are part of my favorite selection for painting pet portraits. You can use these colors to mix just about any possibility for dogs and cats. If you want to learn more about choosing colors to match your reference photos for your pets, be sure to download my brand new free guide called Pet Colors. It's a robust 24-page ebook guide. It's totally free. I'll leave a link in the description for that so you can check it out. And so these are the colors we're going to be using for all 4 of these Christmas cards. If you've printed the traceable line drawing, you'll need a piece of transfer paper. This is Richardson transfer paper. It comes in a really big roll. You can just cut it out and size it to your Christmas card. And I'm just going to cut my traceable line drawing in half so it's easier to trace the one I want to start with. All right, so let's pull out a Christmas card. I haven't even opened these yet, so I'm not sure what they look like here. Oh, that's really nice paper. 140 pound, which is typically what I like to work on. And the box also comes with envelopes. So once you've got all of your supplies assembled and ready to go, we can get started. I'm going to take my piece of transfer paper, place it on top of the card, and then center my design. I might even trim it down just a little bit. Everything needs to be nice and centered. So just check and double check. Make sure it's as high as you want it in the composition, and once you're ready, you can trace it on. This is so helpful to get a quick, easy, and perfect drawing really fast. But of course, you could just sketch directly on your watercolor card as well. I find that doing it this way, I don't have to worry about messing up my paper with erase marks or anything like that. All right, so once you're all set with your paper towel, your water jars, your paints in front of you, one more fun supply you might want to have on hand is a waterproof pen. You can see when I did my test studies, I did some outlining to make them look more illustrative, and I actually used this Pentel ink pen, and it's waterproof ink. It's a dark gray, and it looks really great, I think, to outline your Christmas cards that way. So as long as you have any waterproof ink, that would work just fine. So just have that ready to go for the very end. I also wanted to point out for things like whiskers, I'll be using my Dr. P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White with a really small liner brush to help paint the whiskers on. Grab your brush. Let's start with the Santa hat. We're going to begin with a light tinted wash of indigo mixed with a tiny bit of the turquoise blue for a really light blue. Make sure it's really watery, and we'll start by painting the shadow side on the underside of the Santa hat. Now, watercolor tends to form hard lines. That's just the nature of watercolor. And to soften edges, when you're painting wet on a dry surface like this, you can simply remove some paint and soften those edges manually. So what I'll do now is I'll dip in the water, remove some of that paint, so I have just a damp brush, mostly clean, and then I'll go ahead and scrub along that edge of paint that I just put down. And that helps soften the transition towards the white. And remember, because we'll be using our outliner pen for the top, you don't have to worry about putting paint along the top or anything like that. You can leave the white of the Santa hat mostly pure white. We'll take some of that color and put it on the underside of the ball. Remember, the goal here is not realism necessarily. We want to make these look cute, whimsical, and illustrative. But you can still do this with some dimension. So already that looks great. Now let's do our first layer on the dog's fur. If you're not sure where to start, decide what the lightest value is. And on this Dachshund, I see a really light tan. So I'm going to reach for my yellow ochre, mix that in with some water, and we'll just go ahead and paint over pretty much the whole dog except for the eyes using this light wash of yellow ochre. You can just avoid the eyes and the nose for now. So this is what we would consider just a flat wash of solid color, no variation in color or color value or color temperature, just a solid color flat wash. If it's still wet a little bit, you can take this opportunity to intensify some of your yellow ochre color. So now we can begin adjusting the values. I'm not going to add any additional water to my brush. In fact, I might remove a little bit on the paper towel. This helps me control how much water is in my brush. And I'm going to intensify some of that yellow on the snout, along the side of the face, under the eyes. So we're just beginning to build our values, go darker. Just avoid these big highlights right above the eyes. Those are going to add so much character to the dog. Keep them lighter like you see in the reference photo. And if you feel like this is moving too fast, feel free to pause it at any point and try to match your painting. Take your time. So this is actually really just a second layer using yellow ochre, building up our values, adding more rich yellows to the fur. You might be wondering, well, that's not the color of the dog. Well, when we're working in layers, we work our way up gradually. We sneak our way up to those colors and values. And every layer underneath will affect the layer above it. So it's not like we're doing this for nothing. We are building up lighter values, which will remain exposed as we add the darker values over the top. But the darker values aren't going to go all over everything. We're leaving some of this alone. And so it's so essential to have these color varieties underneath the layers that we continue to add, if that makes sense. So that's it for a yellow ochre layer. Now we're going to begin layering burnt sienna. So we were wondering, when does brown come into play? Burnt sienna is one of my absolute must-have colors on just about every palette, no matter what I'm painting, indoor, outdoor, landscape, people, pets. I always have burnt sienna on my palette. It is just such a useful mixer, and it's a great color all by itself. So let's begin layering this on the underside of the ears. If your yellow ochre is still a little damp, that's okay. It'll soften out on the wet paper and look quite lovely. So I'm drawing with the dark reddish brown underneath the mouth, and you can even pull that into the underside of the mouth right here. And let some of that fur come down over the top of your yellow ochre here. We're really kind of stopping the neckline where this fur is overlapping an imaginary collar maybe. When we outline that with our dark waterproof pen, that'll make it even more clear. So if your edges aren't perfect, that's okay. The pen will help tighten all that up at the end. Now as you paint the ears, this is important on any long-haired animal, move your brush in the direction the hair is growing. So I'm feathering it out and away in this slightly curved motion, mimicking the way the hair is growing on these long, hairy ears. And I'm allowing my brush to miss little gaps, so we see some of those hints of yellow ochre peeking in between. And then on the side of the head, we're going to begin to darken the jaw, the space above the eyes, darkening our values slowly and surely. There's this distinctive funnel-shaped shadow tone in the center of our Dachshund's head, helping highlight the look of eyebrows. So cute. So that's an important shape to include. Try to make it the same shape as what you're seeing. And then on the top of the nose, there's some color variation, some variety in value and color. So we're just going to try to be watchful and mindful of all of that. Here I've lightened up the value on my brush as I paint the space between those darker brush strokes. And I'm moving my brush in the direction of the anatomy of the face. So making a sweeping motion down the side of the face, helping carve out the shapes that we're seeing. Removing a little, and then I'm going to pull that lighter color all across the snout. And then continue to paint that color beneath the eyes. But notice how I'm maintaining a lighter value there. Still a light value on my brush. Constantly adjusting how light and dark my paint is. That is what your water is for. But paper towel essential so you don't have too much water in your brush as you introduce each value and color to your painting. Especially if you're working on an already wet surface, you can imagine adding more water in with your brush is just going to make a mess. So the key to understanding water control, it's usually you're probably using too much if you're having problems with that. So have your paper towel on hand. It's the best tool. Okay, let's grab some more burnt sienna, a little darker, swirling it on the palette to test it out, and paint this opposite ear next. Again, move your brush in the direction the fur is growing. That's so important. And so we're just essentially darkening that whole ear up. Now, one of my favorite combinations for a more chocolate brown is to mix burnt sienna with your ultramarine blue. So our Dachshund needs some more chocolate brown color in it. He's too reddish brown and too yellow, too golden. So I'm going to mix my ultramarine. I'm going to need quite a bit of this, so we'll mix plenty of it in about a 50-50 ratio. And you can see it creates this juicy chocolate brown, just perfect for going darker. So while this left ear is still a little wet, I can start to drop in some of that darker color. But again, being careful not to cover up all of those lighter values that we've been slowly working to build. Allow there to still be lighter values visible underneath your additional brush strokes. And then here under the mouth, I'm going to carve out just underneath, adding a shadow tone here. But I'm not going to leave it like that. That looks strange. So I'm going to take that wet paint and pull it downward, mimicking the movement and direction of the fur growth. And again, still leaving little brush strokes untouched, little areas untouched with this dark paint. So we're getting a sense of the variety of colors revealed beneath, and adding some dark brush strokes to the right ear. Yeah, that chocolate brown is so perfect. So now we can start to darken up the face. I usually leave the eyes for last. It looks strange, I know. But once we add those in, boy, it's going to pop. You're going to love it. So just be patient. Trust the process. Just understand that most paintings do go through an ugly phase. What we're doing right now is building up a base for the eyes, giving them a space that makes sense. And so you can create fur texture and shadow tones under the eyes and over the eyes. So this dark brown is serving as a sort of a bedding for the eyes here. And then you can begin to mark the darker areas that you see, like this center line in the middle of the face. Right now, those markings are looking a little too stark. They need to be more blended with their environment. So I'm going to take a lighter version of my burnt sienna and help soften that transition by creating more of a mid-tone so the dark values just don't look so stark. We still want to preserve this light highlight under the eye while continuing to carve out the shape, the anatomy that we're seeing. Take some more burnt sienna and darken up along the snout right here. There's this almost teepee shape along the top of the nose that you can begin to emphasize with your darker chocolate brown right here. And then maybe a little hint of blue right here in the middle. Definitely see like a cooler tone right there. So a little hint of ultramarine. I think that looks good. So yeah, as we add these darker values, it starts to come to life, starts to look more realistic. And all of these layers are serving to create a more realistic look. Let's add some more burnt sienna just above the eye. And this shape right here. We're essentially doing a pet portrait, and the only thing that makes it holiday is the Christmas hat. So you could totally do this without the hat if you wanted to. All of these techniques for color mixing, for blending, they're all going to be helpful and aid you as you continue to paint pets and animals, dogs and cats. And then let's add a tiny bit of fur texture, just using our brush strokes, the gentle feathering motion with the tip of the brush to add some swooping fur above the eyes and even below the eyes if you wish. And if you're starting to get a little too overworked, a little too picky with it, broaden out your brush strokes. Make sure you're using a big enough brush that you're not tempted to just pick at your painting. But by the time we get to this third or fourth layer, we can start painting looser and just trust that the layers underneath are serving as a structural foundation for all the colors and values we add over the top. Let's mix up one more. I'm going to take some indigo this time. Dark color, and we'll use that on the underside of the mouth. It's okay if the paint underneath is still wet. Just don't introduce any extra water with your brush. But yeah, the mouth is standing out a lot more now. Okay, I think it's time to do the eyes. You've been waiting for this, haven't you? So let's take our indigo, actually let's start with our burnt sienna to paint the brown part of the eye first. We can make it your dark chocolatey brown too. Might be actually a better color. And we'll start with the brown center of the eye. We're just outside the pupil right here. Really important to watch out for the highlights. You're going to need to paint around those. However, if you do mess them up and cover them up accidentally, that's okay. You can always use an opaque white paint to go back in and fix it. I do think it's a better look generally if you can use the white of the paper as your white, but sometimes accidents happen. So that is okay. All right, so there's the brown base of the eyes. Looks a little strange right now. Let's go ahead and grab indigo. This is going to be your darkest color of the day. Make sure it's a creamy consistency, not watery or milky even, but heavy, thick cream, thick paint. And we'll start with this one right here. You could also use your waterproof marker to really outline the eyes at the end too. That's always an option. I see a little square-shaped highlight that I'm trying to paint around, and an additional highlight surrounding that, but it's going to be a little bit darker. So I'm going to let this layer dry, and then I'll go back in and darken that additional highlight right there. We want to make these eyes super expressive, and the highlights are really going to help with that. So if there's one really important thing to watch for, it's your highlights. Often it's not so much about what you're painting as what you're avoiding with your paint that can make all the difference. I've removed a bunch of that paint. Now I have a lighter value of my indigo, and I'm using that to fill in this highlight. I need to go even lighter. But I'm leaving that square untouched. Yep, looks so cute. Let's go to the other eye. You can really see a distinctive black circle So paint around, highlight that square shape. It should match the other eye somewhat, since the light source is the same. And he's got too much of a white of an eye, so we're going to need to tighten that up, darken it up. We'll fill that in with a dark gray as well. So I remove some of that and go in with a lighter value. There. Suddenly our dog is coming to life. So much better once you add the eyes, isn't it? So the last thing is the nose, and for the nose we'll start with the black inner nostrils, just a deep dark circular shape, and of course we still have to add the red for the Santa hat, don't we? Okay, and then I dipped in the water and I'm going to paint across the top of the nose. Trying to stay inside of my drawing. And as you work, your brush might begin to dry out a little bit, so just dip in the water, blot on your paper towel, and keep going. I'm going to paint around these bright highlights for now. Wherever there are possible connections for your dark shapes, just go ahead and connect those. Our imagination can make connections for us too, and so if you happen to blur some shapes together, that's actually a good thing. Okay, so let's go over our highlight, just tighten up that shape. Here we go. And then add a stronger mouth shape with more of a smile. Now is when you can begin to outline a little bit, make it more of an illustration. And then the last thing is the red on the hat. So let's take our cadmium red now. A nice pure version of your red. Milky consistency, just enough water to get the paint flowing. And if you need to tilt your paper a little bit to get a better angle, you can do that. Make sure you have a firm grip on your brush so you don't accidentally drop it. I would say if you drop this color on your painting, you may have to start over. That could be a mistake that isn't fixable. So just hold your brush firmly. Be able to rest your hand on something. Yeah. If you want to add a little bit of a shadow tone on the underside of the hat, you certainly can. You can mix up your black with your brown and blue combination. Can drop that in wet on wet. Again, make sure you don't have any extra water in your brush if you're going to do it this way. But yeah, you can just add a little shadow tone under there. Helps it look even more real. And that's pretty much it. So for some finishing details, if you like, you can use your white, or even a gel pen would work just fine. Here's an example of a gel pen where you could add a couple little white whiskers. With the gel pens, you don't want to press too hard. I think I need to add some skinny little black ones for our Dachshund. The cats are going to have white whiskers, but the dogs, the whiskers aren't usually as prominent. So we'll just go ahead and add a couple little short stubby whiskers right there. And then once it's dry enough, you can take your waterproof pen and begin to outline. The nice thing about a brush pen is that you can get really similar effects to using an actual brush. It just glides across the paper. Love these. And it's really helping outline your drawing, reinforce your drawing. And so you can use that on the bottom edge of the ears. Like that. I would still move it in the direction that the fur is growing. And I'll leave a link in the description for this particular pen too. It's a new pen for me, but I'm loving it so far, And I anticipate I'm going to use it on all 4 of these Christmas cards. But a Copic waterproof marker would work just fine as well. And then the last thing to outline is the hat. I wanted to wait till the red was completely dry before jumping in. Yay, there's our finished little Dachshund Christmas card. These are great for scanning. If you have a scanner, I have an Epson V600 scanner, and it works perfect for scanning my watercolor paintings so that I can digitalize them and sell them on my Etsy shop, or just create a bunch of prints to give away at Christmas time so you don't have to paint every single individual card. That's always a great idea, but get excited. This is just the start of our Christmas card making extravaganza. Join me for the next lesson and we're going to dive into the next Christmas card. I will see you over there.